I'm Laurence Llewelyn-Bowen, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here to celebrate William Morris's 182nd birthday. Yay, go William. In fact, I think he's looking incredibly good for his age. One of the things that's so extraordinary about William Morris, and one of the things that I think this event, the Brilliance of William Morris, really celebrates, is the fact that actually he's still so approachable. His work is still so communicative. And that even now, 182 years later, he's still such an incredibly recognisable brand, but a brand that comes with so much goodwill, so much sense of happiness built into it. So congratulations, William Morris. I am delighted to be here. Very, very wisely, everyone persuaded me not to jump out of a birthday cake, because that could have got quite messy. That was very generous, very grown-up-ish. I now feel very grown-up standing here and talking about William Morris like this. And also slightly scared about what you're going to hear after me from the real grown-ups who actually know all about William Morris. But I mean, listen, I absolutely adore William Morris. William Morris, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the most powerfully evocative, I was going to say British designers, but actually I'm going to say British people, because genuinely there is someone who totally turned around an entire generation to such an extent that that generation carried on to the next generation and the generation after that. He also was working at a time when suddenly you had this explosion of mass media. Suddenly you could see William Morris's work through photographic reproductions in magazines in Australia, in America, in India. And so actually his style was something that became global more or less instantaneously. And I think we don't make enough fuss about him. I mean, it drives me mad. You think about our banknotes. We have an enormous amount of engineers, but where's William Morris on a banknote? He should be on a banknote. For goodness sake, this is the man that has launched 1,000,001 plasticized National Trust shopping bags. That alone should be something that does it. But why is he so cool? Why is he so extraordinary? Why are we here now? Why are we all still in his thrall? Because surely it should be quite remote. I mean, he's 182 today. Hurrah, happy birthday. He was working at a time that we should believe is something that we can't relate to. It was a society that we can't see reflected in the way that we live. But, and this is what I think it all boils down to, design is about communication. Design is about speaking to people about experiences that you've had. And he still does that. Still, 182 years later, his work is instantly recognizable. His work tells a story that we're all part of. It's like an eternal, totally accessible fairy tale. And I think there is something a bit folkloric, a bit fairy tale about what he's got to say. But the thing to remember, the critical piece of information about William Morris, as my art teacher said to me, the thing that you must never forget about William Morris, he had a very big bottom. And that defined him. Extraordinary looking fellow. But yeah, he felt very uncomfortable, literally, with Victorian furniture. It encouraged him to rethink the fact that in the middle of the 19th century, furniture was rather disastrously neo-Rococo. You know, I mean, imagine the worst kind of 1970s revival, and you've got furniture of the 1840s, 1850s. It's papier-mâché, for goodness sake. It's dripping in mother of pearl. It's all about a really rather nasty, showbizy ostentation. He is someone that doesn't want to support that. He is someone that actually sees in the past a way forward into the future. And I think that is so sexy, that actually all of his passion, all of his romance, all of his interest, his depth in medievalism doesn't just stay as a kind of pastiche, as an arid end in its own right. Actually, all of that he uses as a springboard into a completely new way of designing. And the other thing, of course, that really, gets me, the other thing that really I find so extraordinary is that he was designing for as many people as possible. He knew that actually it was getting to as many people as possible. It is extremely easy to design in a remote way, in an elevated way, to focus solely on the very rich who can afford the very best. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to ensure that as many people as possible could have something nice, could have something that he designed. I mean, obviously, the debate will go on because he could never achieve that. He could never actually make it work financially, economically, for it to get to as many people as possible in his lifetime. But my standing on this is that actually his style did go forward. When you think that the vast majority of homes in this country were built between 1880 and 1930, actually the vast majority of this country has William Morris DNA hardwired into its architecture. And actually, when you think about it, even today, even with modern house builders, the prevalent style still has those echoes of arts and crafts. I'm sure he would throw his hands up in horror when he looked at some of the things that we are building, but nonetheless, these are structures that adopt a Morrisian arts and crafts language, and yet they're being built in the 21st century. And listen, that is an unbelievable legacy, because this isn't just about a generalized style. This isn't even about a movement. This is about one man's personality, one man's ability to use design to communicate something that we all wanted to get involved in. But the other thing, aside from the big bottom, which is, something that he was blessed with, shall we say, I always liked the fact that he often had blue hands as well. Ginger beard, blue hands, big bottom. Shwitch-woo. But even that, there he was. After the 1860s, you could have any colour you wanted. In a world of unbelievable drabness, in a world where, the vast majority of people would never see true red, let alone purple or delphinium, suddenly, overnight, you have the purple season. You have, because of Samuel Perkins, an ability for every shop girl to wear royal purple. Ruskin was appalled. And to a certain extent, William Morris could see what was going wrong there. Just because you can make colour doesn't mean you should. In the way that just because you can make a spindly papier-mâché Rococo revival chair oozing with mother of pearl doesn't mean you should. Actually, he was saying, let's think about what works. Let's think about what things are going to do when you get them home. Let's think about how they work with the way that you live. And rather than using aniline dyes, he revived indigo, which is, an incredibly old-fashioned way of dyeing fabric, ridiculously old-fashioned, and amounted to blue hands, which can't have been very pleasant for anyone he knew. But he understood that actually there is a subtlety to that message. There is a depth to that message. The fact that he's using a deliberately inappropriately almost old-fashioned, Luddite way of creating blue, when in fact the world of colour was his oyster, is a way of saying that actually, you're all worth it. Actually, this product is about so much more than just this one object. This thing, this bolt of cloth, this carpet, this tapestry, this cushion, this chair, is actually about a long-term relationship, a tradition, a legacy. And what I love about Morris, and that's why I am here, is that that legacy doesn't just go back, it goes forward as well. That actually his incredible ability to be able to use the way that the objects that we use every day as design icons has meant that actually we will never truly, I think, be able to separate ourselves from him. I tried. I was growing up in the late 60s, early 70s. My parents' friends were all really very, very slinky graphic designers and architects, and they lived in environments of tremendous aubergineness. There was brown needle-cord carpet on the ceiling, ladies and gentlemen. It was so sexy and swing your pants. And yet, my home environment was absolutely the embodiment of ghastly good taste. And the only thing that my mother ever did to let her hair down was have a little bit of William Morris. So actually, for years, I tried to fight against it. For years, I saw it as a terribly stultifying thing. For years, actually, I lobbied her to allow me to paint my ceiling purple. She never did. The rest is history. That's where it all comes from. But actually, the thing is about William Morris is that you can't escape his clutches. Just when you think you've cornered him and you've got him into this sort of rather genteel corner of, inappropriately, socialistic niceness, you then just look at one of the patterns and you just see something incredible. I was doing an interview for The Times a couple of weeks ago about wallpaper, and I got terribly overexcited because I was describing acanthus. And I, in fact, it was a very interesting experience because I'd never actually spoken about acanthus before. But it is the most extraordinary piece of pattern making. It is peristaltic action. It is this dirty, great big kind of lower intestine that goes from floor to ceiling that has a muscular ability to make a room suddenly come alive. I was very, very lucky years ago. I was doing a series for BBC Two, and we went to, I can't remember who had the license then, but they were hand blocking acanthus. And it was so intricate, so that the alignment had to be so unbelievably perfect. And I think he was called Ray, the man that was hand blocking it. And he looked like he'd been designed by William Morris. If ever there was a man that should be printing William Morris, this was Ray. And he was so tender about it, so proud of it. I mean, obviously, each of these rolls was worth many, many, many hundreds of pounds. But, he was taking such great care about it. But inevitably, you've got a camera crew, you've got a microphone up, so you ask him, so Ray, have you got this at home? And of course, there's this sort of extraordinary look of, I would do anything to have this at home if only I could afford it. Because it means something so special to all of us. William Morris, I think, had this incredible ability to understand and then communicate Britishness. And it's a Britishness that should, at that time, be really quite difficult, really quite unpleasant. It should be all about empire. It should be all about bully boy tactics, the muscular arm of Christianity, all of those things that we immediately associate with that last kind of 25, 30 years of the 19th century. But actually, it's about none of that at all, because he was about none of that. He was someone who, I feel, had such an incredibly balanced and very, very modern outlook on the world, a very modern way of looking at his own country. And all of that comes out in every single little bit of anything that he ever does. When you look at a Morris pattern, we're all highly amused by the casual drapage of the Morris tapestry on the floor here. We were all feeling very well. So one moment I was sort of rather concerned that I might have to blow my nose in it. But you look at something like this, and it is all about an ability to be able to tell a story through the simplest possible means. And that is what he's so good at, is being able to strip back something that should be so ridiculously frilly, something that should be so ridiculously over-ornate, and just use it as if it was a perfectly edited, perfectly constructed communication point. But I think the big thing about William Morris now is that we are moving into a phase where we are getting less and less impressed by the 20th century. The 20th century was an era of amazing, incredible political and sociological change. It left us all in a totally different place, which was incredible. But it did do a very good job at throwing the baby out with the aesthetic bathwater. There was a lot of things that we consigned to the waste paper basket of posterity that actually we are now beginning to rediscover. And I think that William Morris is very much part of that as well. I mean, it didn't really help that in the 70s he was rather over-enthusiastically recoloured. But actually, there was that point, and I, as I say, had it myself, where there was a danger that we took it all too literally, we took it too superficially, and that actually that William Morris style was all a bit Abigail's party, was all a bit of its era. But my feeling now, my point now, is that that's so wrong, because actually that style is constantly of a new era. It's constantly moving forward because it has this unbelievable ability to be both modern and yet still tell a story that goes back a lot further, that has a much, much deeper relationship with design history and all of the things that we love, all of the things that surround us. And I think one of the things that is just so brilliant about him is his romantic streak. His ability to be able to use romance in its literal sense, a romance that's all about telling a story, a romance that's about being more than just romantic and actually being much deeper. And I love the fact that actually everything he did had a meaning to him, and as a result, it very much has a meaning to us. I don't know where I'd be without William Morris. I mean, I do now completely throw myself on my sword. I have committed enormous crimes in the name of William Morris over my long television career. I have made William Morris out of yogurt pots. I have made William Morris out of sticky back plastic, and I'm sure he'll find it in his heart to forgive me when we get reunited past the pearly gates. Because actually, I'd always hoped that people could see past the yogurt pot and understand that actually this is an introduction. This isn't an end in itself. And let's face it, the yogurt pot didn't last very long anyway. But it's a way of being able to get someone watching television looking for entertainment to then take seriously a name, a brand even, dare I say it, a legacy that they can then discover themselves. And I've been very lucky. I've been allowed access to William Morris in a very, very casual way. I've filmed at the Gallery, I've filmed at the Red House, filmed at Standard. I've been more or less everywhere where there's a little bit of William Morris. And I'm constantly not just impressed, but constantly seduced by the fact that we have a British designer who has, in a way that we so rarely celebrate, been able to totally encapsulate all the things that we are so proud of, all the things that we're so interested in, and to do it for the one thing that we are all absolutely passionate about, which is where we live. And now with the way that my business has expanded into China, into Malaysia, into Singapore, just got back from the Philippines, it's absolutely fascinating that from that side of the world, when they look at the British home, they see William Morris. They see a home that is essentially suburban, that is essentially about the arts and crafts, that is extremely well built, but that is phenomenally democratic, that is all about a very balanced, very fair attitude to living. And it's expressed through how we build. It's very easy to look at continental Europe and be very seduced, very distracted by a lot of very, very lovely architecture. We need to be much more respectful for the ordinary architecture that's under our noses, because that is where you'll find William Morris. That is where you will see his DNA going forward. Those are the kind of the jewel caskets that take everything that he believed forward with him. I'm very touched that I've been asked to share my passion for William Morris with you. But I do feel we should actually be starting a campaign to put him on a banknote, don't you? I think a very pretty William Morris banknote, because actually he's 200 soonish, so I think we could probably coincide that. Who will join me in my quest? Yes, I think he deserves it after all of that. Anyway, thank you very much indeed. I am very much the amuse-bouche. You're about to get some very, very solid and very thought-through intellectual fact about the great man. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.